The elevator stopped between floors at 6:47 in the morning, and my wife said, "That's not a contraction." She was gripping the handrail with both hands, leaning forward with her eyes closed. And I was holding a plastic bag with 2 everything bagels and a container of cream cheese that I'd walked 4 blocks to get because the place on our street doesn't toast them right. The elevator lurched, dropped maybe 8 inches, and stopped again. The lights stayed on. Elena opened her eyes and looked at me with the expression she uses when I'm about to panic about something she's already processed. "The power flickered," she said. "Press the button." I pressed the lobby button. Nothing. I pressed our floor. Nothing. I pressed the door open button and held it for 10 seconds. And then I pressed the emergency call button and heard a tone that rang 4 times and connected to nothing. Elena straightened up and put one hand on her belly and said, "Okay, so we're in an elevator." She said it the way she says most things now, with a kind of exhausted clarity that doesn't leave room for my version of the situation. 9 months will do that. 9 months of watching your body become someone else's address will strip the politeness off every sentence you don't need. I met Elena Vargas in a laundromat on Flatbush Avenue when I was 26 and she was 24, and neither of us could afford the machines that actually dried. She was reading a used paperback of Train Dreams, and I was pretending to read the instructions on a bottle of fabric softener so I could keep glancing at her without committing to a conversation. She caught me on the 3rd glance and said, "It's softener, not a novel. You pour it in." That was Elena. She doesn't wait for you to be ready. She doesn't even wait for herself. She just starts. And the clarity follows. We got married in 2019 in her mother's backyard in Bayonne, New Jersey, with 41 people and a catering order that arrived 90 minutes late. We moved into this building, Sycamore Towers, 14 floors, 206 units, built in 1987, and renovated just enough to justify the rent increase because it was 11 minutes from her hospital and 14 from the warehouse where I load freight for a regional distributor. I am not a doctor. I am not a nurse. I am not an engineer or a carpenter or a man who fixes things. I drive a forklift. I move pallets. I know which dock doors stick and which ones slam if you don't catch them. And I know how to shrink wrap a load so it survives a highway turn. And none of that matters right now. The elevator moved again at 6:53. It dropped to the lobby and the doors opened, and the first thing I saw was Glenn Taggart from 4B standing at the front desk with a fire extinguisher in his hands and blood on the sleeve of his robe. The lobby was empty except for him and a woman I didn't recognize, sitting on the floor near the mailboxes with her knees pulled up and her phone pressed flat against her ear. Glenn looked at us and said, "Don't go outside." Elena stepped out of the elevator. I followed her. The cream cheese container had cracked in the bag, and I was holding it at an angle to keep it from leaking, and I remember thinking about that, thinking about the cream cheese, while Glenn explained that something had happened on the street, that a man had attacked the morning doorman, that the doorman had bitten a woman coming in from a run, that the woman had made it to the 2nd floor stairwell before she collapsed, and then stood up wrong. He said, "Stood up wrong," twice, not got up. Stood up wrong. What does that mean? Elena asked. Glenn set the fire extinguisher on the front desk. His hands were shaking. "It means the building super hit the security lockdown 20 minutes ago, and the street doors are sealed, and the fire exits are bolted from the inside, and there are 2 people on the 2nd floor landing who are not people anymore." Elena looked at me. Not for reassurance, for logistics. "What floor did we park on?" she asked. "There's no leaving," Glenn said. "That's what I'm telling you." Our apartment was on the 7th floor. 7F. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. a kitchen with a window that faced the air shaft, and a nursery we'd spent 4 weekends painting a color called quiet sage that looked nothing like sage and nothing like quiet, but Elena had chosen it from a sample, and I'd learned by the 3rd trimester not to revisit closed decisions. The crib was assembled. The dresser had 6 weeks of newborn clothes folded in the top 2 drawers. The go bag was packed by the door hospital bag, Elena called it. Not go bag, because she said go bag sounded like we were fleeing a country, and she wanted to associate the birth with a plan, not an escape. I think about that distinction now. We took the stairs because Glenn said the elevators were running on backup generator, and he didn't trust them to hold. Elena climbed slowly. I stayed 1 step below her with my hand on her back, which she tolerated for 3 flights, and then said, "I can feel you steering me. Stop." I stopped. On the 4th floor landing, we passed a door that was propped open with a sneaker and heard a television playing inside the hallway at a volume that meant someone was trying to drown out something else. On the 5th floor, we heard a baby crying. On the 6th floor, we heard nothing, and the silence was worse. We got into 7F, and Elena went straight to the bathroom, and I stood in the kitchen holding the bag of ruined bagels and listened to the faucet run. The apartment smelled like the lavender plug-ins she'd bought for the nursery and the coffee I'd made before I left for the bagels. Back when the morning was still a morning and not a perimeter. My phone had 3% battery because I'd forgotten to charge it overnight, which is a thing I do constantly. And Elena had stopped reminding me about it 2 months ago because she said she was done managing 2 dependents before the first one arrived. I plugged it in and opened the group chat for our floor. Naya Singh from 7A had sent 6 messages in 11 minutes. The first said, "Does anyone know what's happening downstairs?" The second said, "My husband went to check and hasn't come back." The third said, "Raj, please answer your phone." The 4th, 5th, and 6th said, "Please and Raj." Elena came out of the bathroom and sat on the edge of the bed and put both hands flat on her belly and breathed in through her nose and out through her mouth in the pattern she'd practiced in the birth preparation class we took in a community center basement in Park Slope with 9 other couples and an instructor named Donna who said the breath was the first gift you give your child. Elena did 4 cycles. Then she said, "How far along are the contractions?" "You said it wasn't a contraction." "In the elevator it wasn't. That was the baby dropping. This is different." She looked at the clock on the nightstand. "I need you to time them, starting now." I sat down next to her with my phone charging at 9% and opened the stopwatch. Elena breathed. 40 seconds later, she exhaled hard and said, "Mark." I pressed the button. She leaned back against the headboard and closed her eyes. "There are things on the 2nd floor," I said. "I heard Glenn. He said the building is locked down, the fire exits, the street doors." "I heard him, Marcus. If you're in labor," "I might not be in labor. This could be prodromal. It could stall. First babies take forever. Dana said first babies take forever." She opened her eyes and looked at me. "But if it doesn't stall, I need you to understand something. I am not delivering this baby on a floor I painted with a roller from Home Depot. I need clean water, I need clean hands, and I need someone in this building who has done this before." "Done what before?" "Delivered a baby, Marcus. Caught one. Seen one come out of a body and known what to do with it." The stopwatch was running. I was staring at it like it was doing something important. Because staring at the stopwatch meant I didn't have to figure out the answer to a question I didn't have language for yet. What do you do when the building is the hospital, and the hospital has things in the stairwell, and your wife's body has started a process that no lockdown can pause? "I'll find someone," I said. Elena closed her eyes again. Time the next one first, then go. The second contraction came 11 minutes later. She gripped my wrist and didn't make a sound. I left the apartment at 7:22 a.m. with a flashlight from the junk drawer, my phone at 14%, and no plan more sophisticated than knocking on doors. The hallway on 7 was carpeted in a gray-brown pattern that had always reminded me of airport terminal flooring, and the overhead fluorescents were on, which meant the generator was still feeding the common areas. I knocked on 7A first. Naya Singh opened the door with red eyes and a kitchen knife held flat against her thigh. She was maybe 30, software developer, moved in 8 months ago with her husband Raj, who worked in hospital administration at Methodist. I'd spoken to her exactly 3 times, once about a package delivered to the wrong unit, once in the elevator about weather, once when Elena invited her for tea, and Naya came for 20 minutes and left apologetically because she had a call. Raj went downstairs, she said before I could ask anything. 40 minutes ago, he's not answering. I know, I saw your messages. Is your wife okay? She might be in labor. Naya's face did something I hadn't seen before, a recalculation that moved across her features like a shadow passing over a field. The knife lowered 1/2 inch. How far apart? 11 minutes, maybe less now. Who else is on this floor? I knew the layout, but not the people. 7A was Naya and Raj. 7B had been empty for 2 months, lease dispute, according to the super. 7C was an older man named Dennis Achebe, who I'd seen carrying dry cleaning and who nodded in the hallway with the precision of someone who'd been nodding in hallways for decades, without inviting follow-up. 7D was a couple in their 20s I'd never spoken to. 7E was a woman who Elena said was a retired something teacher, maybe, or administrator. 7F was us. I need to find someone with medical experience, I said. Anyone. Nurse, EMT, veterinarian. Anyone who's seen a birth. Try 9, Naya said. There's a woman on 9 my husband mentioned. He said she was a nurse practitioner. I don't remember the unit. What about you? Can you? I write code, Marcus. I can't deliver a baby. She paused. But I can sit with her, if you need me to sit with her while you look. Yes, please. She's timing contractions. Just be with her. Naya put the knife in her back pocket, which struck me as unsafe but also not the thing to correct right now, and walked past me toward 7F. I heard her knock gently and say, Elena, it's Naya from down the hall. I went to the stairwell. The door to the 7th floor stairwell had a small wired glass window, and I looked through it before I opened it. The landing was empty. The stairs going up were clear. The stairs going down disappeared around the turn, and the fluorescents below were buzzing at a frequency that meant at least one tube was dying. I could hear something from below, not movement, not voices, but a wet sound that I cataloged as a pipe leak, because my brain was not yet ready to catalog it as anything else. I went up. 8th floor. I knocked on 4 doors. 2 didn't answer. The 3rd was opened by a man in his 50s wearing reading glasses and a Fordham sweatshirt who said his name was Paul Meehan, that he was a retired high school principal, and that he had no medical training, but could I please tell him what the hell was going on? I told him what Glenn had told me. Paul listened without interrupting, then said, My wife is visiting her sister in Connecticut. I've been calling for an hour. Nothing connects. I need a nurse, I said. Or anyone medical. My wife's in labor. Try 9C, Paul said. Iris Cologne. She was an L&D nurse at Kings County for 20 years. Retired maybe 3 years ago. I've spoken to her in the elevator. She'll know what to do if anyone does. 9th floor. I knocked on 9C. The door opened on a chain, and a woman in her 60s looked through the gap with a face that was already assessing me, the way medical people assess. Not hostile, not welcoming, just diagnostic. "My wife is 9 months pregnant," I said. "She's having contractions 11 minutes apart. The building is locked down. I can't get her to a hospital." The chain came off. Iris Kalan was 5'3" with short gray hair and hands that moved with the economy of someone who'd spent decades reaching for things in urgent rooms. She was wearing slippers and a cardigan, and she looked at me the way Elena looks at me when I'm about to explain something she already understands. "What's her name?" "Elena, 7th floor, 7F. "First baby?" "Yes." "How long since her water broke?" "I don't think it has." "Good. That's time." She turned back into her apartment and came out 14 seconds later with a canvas bag that she'd clearly packed before I arrived. "I heard the stairwell an hour ago," she said. "I've been waiting for someone to come." Iris walked the stairs the way she probably walked hospital corridors, unhurried, efficient, reading the environment with a peripheral attention that didn't require turning her head. On the 8th floor landing, she paused and looked down the next flight and said, "That smell." I'd been trying not to identify it. She identified it without flinching. Decomposition accelerant. Whatever's happening to them, it's fast. The tissue breaks down while they're still moving. I've never seen that in a living system. She said it the way she might say a patient's blood pressure reading, factual, contained, professionally filed. We reached the 7th floor. Naya was sitting on the edge of our bed next to Elena, holding her phone with the stopwatch open. Elena was leaning back with her eyes closed and her hands laced under her belly. When she opened her eyes and saw Iris, something happened in her face that I hadn't seen since the morning she took the pregnancy test, and looked at me with an expression that was not happiness, but the cessation of fear, which is a different thing, and maybe a better one. "I'm Iris," Iris said, setting the canvas bag on the dresser. "I did labor and delivery for 22 years. I've delivered babies in hallways, in cars, in a McDonald's bathroom once in Canarsie. This is a bed with clean sheets in a room with running water. You're ahead of most of my career." Elena almost smiled. "The contractions are 9 minutes apart now." "Shorter since you sat down?" "Slightly." Iris washed her hands at the kitchen sink with dish soap and hot water for a full minute. She came back and asked Elena a series of questions: medical history, allergies, blood type, the name of her OB, any complications during pregnancy, previous surgeries. Elena answered all of them calmly. And I stood in the doorway of the nursery realizing that I didn't know Elena's blood type. I'd known her for 7 years, and I didn't know her blood type. "I need to check your cervix," Iris said. "That okay?" "Yes." "Marcus, could you give us a minute?" I stepped into the hallway and stood there with my hands at my sides like a man waiting for a bus. Naya came out and stood next to me. She hadn't heard from Raj. She was holding her phone in both hands, and her jaw was set in a way that said she'd already calculated probabilities and was now managing the result. "There are people on the 2nd floor who aren't people," I said. "Yes." And Raj went down to the lobby to find out what was happening. He does that. He goes toward information. It's how he's built. She looked at the wall. It's usually a good quality. Iris opened the door. She's 4 centimeters. Active labor. This is happening today, probably in the next 6 to 10 hours. She looked at me with a directness that left no room for the question I wanted to ask, which was, is she going to be okay? Because the answer to that question was the next several hours, and not a sentence. "I need a few things. Clean towels, as many as you have. A pot of boiled water, cooled. String or shoelaces, clean. A sharp scissors or a new razor blade. Plastic sheeting if you have it, trash bags if you don't. And I need the room warm. I went to the linen closet. I pulled out every towel we owned, which was 6 bath towels, 4 hand towels, and 2 that Elena had designated as good towels, that we never used because I didn't understand what occasion makes a towel good enough to use. Today was the occasion. While I boiled water, Iris sat with Elena and talked in a low voice that I could hear but not make out. I caught fragments. Breathe into the pressure. Your body already knows the sequence. The baby's position is good. These were not reassurances. They were operational briefings delivered in the vocal register of calm. And I understood that Iris was doing what I could not. She was being competent in the room where it mattered. Naya appeared at the kitchen door. "Marcus, there's someone knocking on the stairwell door." I put down the pot. I picked up the flashlight. Naya and I walked to the stairwell entrance, and I looked through the wired glass. On the other side was a man I recognized from the building, thin, mid-30s, wearing a sweat-soaked t-shirt. His name was Kevin something, 10th floor. He was holding a child against his chest. I opened the door. Kevin came through, holding a boy who was maybe 4 years old with his face buried in his father's shoulder. Kevin was breathing hard, and his left arm had a scratch on it. Not a bite. I checked. A scratch from what he said was a broken railing on the 10th floor stairwell, where he'd caught himself slipping on something wet. "They're on 5, he said. 2 of them. They were in the hallway on 5, and I had to go around through the service stairs to get down here. The service stairs on the east side are still clear from 10 to 7. How many people are left up there?" "I don't know. I saw doors open on 10. People were packing. One couple was trying to get to the roof." He shifted the boy on his hip. "I can't stay up there alone with him." "What's his name?" "Luca." "Come in." I brought Kevin and Luca into the apartment. Elena was on the bed with Iris beside her. And she looked at the child, and then at me, and I watched the calculus happen behind her eyes. She was measuring what this meant, not sentimentally, but structurally. More people meant more noise and more need and more variables in a space that had just become a delivery room. "The nursery," she said. "Put them in the nursery." I set Kevin and Luca up in the room we'd painted quiet sage, with a pillow from the couch and a blanket from the closet and a juice box from the fridge. Luca didn't speak. He sat on the floor next to the crib and stared at the mobile hanging above it, felt animals Elena had ordered from an Etsy shop in Portland. A fox and a rabbit and a bird and a bear, spinning slowly in the airshaft draft from the window. Kevin sat beside his son and held his hand and didn't ask me anything else, because he could see, as anyone entering that apartment could see, that the center of gravity was the woman on the bed and everything else was perimeter. At 8:40 a.m., the power went out. The generator must have run dry or failed because the fluorescents died and the refrigerator stopped humming, and the building made a sound I'd never heard it make, a settling, a mechanical exhale, as if the systems that had been holding the structure in a state of habitation had given up and the building had reverted to what it actually was: concrete and steel and glass, indifferent to the things inside it. Iris didn't pause. She was already opening her canvas bag and pulling out 2 battery-powered lanterns and a headlamp. And I understood that the bag had been packed not this morning, but long before. That Iris Cologne had been a woman who expected to be needed in the dark. "The water," she said. "Is the pressure still on?" I went to the kitchen and turned the faucet. A thin stream. Then it coughed. Then it ran normally. Still on, for now. Fill everything. Every pot, every bowl, the bathtub. Do it now. Naya helped me. We filled the bathtub, 4 stock pots, a mixing bowl, a pasta pot, and Elena's electric kettle without the electric. The water pressure dropped noticeably in the last 2 minutes. By the time we finished, the faucet was producing a pencil-thin stream that wavered like it was deciding whether to continue. From the stairwell below us, something hit a door. Not a knock. An impact. The sound came up through the concrete like a vibration you feel in your back teeth before you hear it with your ears. Then another. Then a rhythm that wasn't a rhythm because it had no pattern. Just recurrence, the intervals wrong, the force wrong. Everything about it communicating that the thing producing it was not trying to open the door, but was incapable of not hitting it. Elena had a contraction at 8:47. 8 minutes since the last one. She gripped the bed rail, and Iris timed it and said, "Good, progressing." Iris's headlamp made a cone of light that turned Elena's face into the only visible thing in the room. And I stood at the threshold watching my wife contract around our child in a building that was losing its systems one by one. And I understood for the first time that the baby was not waiting for conditions to improve. The baby had its own clock, and that clock did not care about the 2nd floor, or the 5th, or the things that were hitting doors in the dark. By 9:30, we'd established a kind of structure. Elena was on the bed with Iris. Naya was monitoring the hallway. Kevin and Luca were in the nursery with the door closed. I was the one moving between rooms, checking water, checking the stairwell window, relaying information I didn't have to people who needed it. Dennis Achebe from 7C appeared at our door at 9:15. He was 71, retired civil engineer, born in Lagos and living in this building for 14 years. He was wearing pressed trousers and a button-down shirt, which struck me as either dignified or delusional. And he carried a toolbox and a battery-powered radio that was cycling through static on every band. He'd heard Kevin arrive. He'd heard the commotion. He knocked and said, "I understand there is a medical situation. I have no medical skill, but I have structural knowledge of this building. The superintendent shared drawings with me 4 years ago during a water line dispute. I know the chase walls. I know the utility risers. I know where the building is weak." I let him in because I didn't know what else to do. And because Elena, from the bed, said, "Let him in, Marcus." Dennis sat at the kitchen table and drew a cross-section of the building on the back of a grocery receipt. 14 floors, 2 stairwells, main and east service, 1 elevator shaft, utility risers running vertically through chase walls on the west side, trash chute, laundry room in the basement, mechanical room in the basement, roof access through a locked hatch on 14 that required a key the super kept in the lobby office. "The doors between floors are fire-rated," Dennis said. "They will hold against force for some time, but they are held shut by magnetic locks powered by the fire alarm system. When the alarm system loses power, the magnetic locks release and the doors default to closed but unlatched. They can be pushed open from either side." "The power is out," I said. "Yes." "So the stairwell doors are unlatched. On every floor. The arithmetic did itself. Things on the 2nd floor. Things on the 5th floor, per Kevin. Stairwell doors no longer locked on any floor. 14 floors of hallways connected by 2 vertical shafts, with doors that a persistent body could push open simply by continuing to push. "How do we lock them?" I asked. Dennis opened his toolbox. Inside were screwdrivers, a drill with a half-charged battery, a handful of lag bolts, cable ties, and a small pry bar. "We don't lock them, we barricade them. But we do it selectively. We seal the 7th-floor stairwell doors from the inside using furniture and bolts through the doorframe. It won't hold forever. It will hold long enough. Long enough for what? Dennis looked at me, then at the bedroom doorway where Iris's headlamp made a halo on the ceiling. Long enough for whatever is happening in that room to finish. We barricaded the main stairwell door first. Dennis directed, and I labored. We pushed the hallway console table against it. Then Dennis drilled lag bolts through the door frame at an angle that pinned the door against the frame. He worked with the precision of a man who had spent his career knowing which loads bear and which ones don't. Naya and I then moved to the east service stairwell door and repeated the process with a bookcase from the hallway alcove and more lag bolts. At 10:15, while Dennis was testing the hold on the east door, we heard footsteps above us. Not the wrong kind, human footsteps, quick and purposeful. Then knocking from the 8th floor side of the main stairwell door. A voice, female, muffled. "Is anyone down there? We're coming down from 12. There are 4 of us." Dennis looked at me. I looked at the barricade. The lag bolts were set. The console table was wedged. Opening it meant undoing 20 minutes of work, and the sound of disassembly would carry down the stairwell to the things below just as clearly as it would carry up to the people above. "If we open this," Dennis said, "we are opening it to everything between here and the lobby." The knocking came again. "Please, we have a child." I looked down the hall towards 7F, where my wife was 6 centimeters dilated in a room lit by a single headlamp. And I looked at the stairwell door, where someone's child was standing on the wrong side of a barricade I'd built. And I felt the dilemma settle into my chest like a stone swallowed whole. The woman's name was Priya Dasgupta. She was 38, a pediatric resident at downstate, who'd come home after a double shift to find the building sealed and the stairwells becoming vertical cemeteries. With her were her 2 children, a 9-year-old daughter named Mira and a 6-year-old son named Adi, and a man named Cal Riggins from 12D, who was 62 and had emphysema and had made it down 5 flights on lungs that sounded like a paper bag crumpling. We opened the barricade. Dennis and I pulled the console table back and unscrewed the lag bolts with his drill while Naya stood at the stairwell window watching the flight below with a kitchen knife she'd taken from our apartment without asking. The door opened, and Priya came through first, carrying Adi, with Mira pressed against her leg and Cal behind them, listing against the wall and wheezing. It took Dennis and me 4 minutes to reassemble the barricade. During those 4 minutes, the stairwell was open, and the sound of our drill carried downward into the concrete shaft like a dinner bell rung in a canyon. I heard something shift 2 floors below. A door banging open, maybe 5, maybe 6. The acoustic geometry of a stairwell turns every sound into a rumor of its own location. And I couldn't tell if what I heard was coming closer or simply existing in a space that no longer had the power to contain it. The barricade went back up. Dennis tested it. It held. Priya set Adi down in the hallway and looked at me and said, "I'm a pediatrician, not an OB, but I've done rotations. Where is she?" "I took her to Elena." Iris looked up from the bed, where she was pressing 2 fingers against Elena's wrist, counting pulse, and assessed Priya in a single glance that contained an entire professional negotiation. Iris was retired L and D. Priya was active pediatrics. The hierarchy was immediate and required no discussion. Iris delivered, Priya received. The handoff would be from one set of trained hands to another, and the baby would never touch a surface that hadn't been prepared by someone who understood what sterile meant in the absence of a sterile field. "How far?" Priya asked. 6 to 7 centimeters 40 minutes ago, Iris said. "I'll check again soon. Contractions at 6 minutes, lasting about 50 seconds. Fetal heart tones palpated normally at last check." No decelerations I can detect without a monitor. Do you have anything for pain? Nothing I'd trust without knowing the source. She's managing. Elena opened her eyes and looked at Priya and said, "How many people are in my apartment now?" I counted. Elena and me, Iris, Naya, Kevin and Luca, Dennis, Priya, Mira, and Adi. Cal. 11 people in a 2-bedroom apartment on the 7th floor of a sealed building with failing water pressure and no power. And things ascending the stairwells toward doors held shut by furniture and hardware store lag bolts. 11, I said. Okay, Elena said. She closed her eyes. Okay. I went to the kitchen. Cal was sitting at the table with Dennis, breathing into his cupped hands. His inhaler was on the table with maybe a quarter of the canister left. Dennis had the radio out and was scanning again. AM, FM, nothing. Static, a half second of what might have been a voice on 10:10 AM, and then gone. Mira and Adi were in the nursery with Luca. 3 children in a room designed for one who hadn't arrived yet, sitting under a mobile of felt animals while their parents made decisions in the next room about how to keep the floor between them and the dead from becoming a permeable membrane. Naya pulled me into the hallway. Raj would have come back by now. I know. He went to the lobby. The lobby is where Glenn said it started. She swallowed. I need to check. If the east stairwell is clear above, it's not clear. Kevin said 5 was compromised. Kevin came down the east side from 10. He said the east was clear from 10 to 7. That was 2 hours ago. I know what time it was. Her voice hardened. Not at me, at the situation, at the arithmetic, at the 11-floor column of concrete and shadow between her and the last place her husband was seen. I'm going to the lobby. Naya, I'm telling you, not asking you. She looked at the barricaded door. I'll take the east side. I'll go quiet. If it's bad, I'll come back. If it's not, I'll bring him back. I wanted to tell her not to go. I wanted to say the thing you say when someone you barely know is about to walk into a stairwell where the lights are dead and the doors don't lock. And the sounds rising from below have stopped being sounds and started being evidence. But I didn't say it, because Naya's face held the same expression Elena's held when she told me to find a nurse, the expression of a person who has already decided and is informing you as a courtesy. Take the flashlight, I said. Take Dennis's pry bar. She took both. She went to the east barricade. Dennis opened it. She slipped through. Dennis closed it behind her and re-bolted it. And the sound of her footsteps descending disappeared into the shaft, like a coin dropped into deep water. At 11:20 a.m., Elena's contractions were 5 minutes apart, and she was making a sound I'd never heard from her before. Low, involuntary, originating from a place in her body that speech doesn't reach. Iris had checked again. 8 centimeters. Transition was approaching. Iris explained to me, in the hallway while Priya sat with Elena, that transition is the phase when the cervix completes dilation and the body prepares to push. It is the most painful phase. It is also the shortest. It is also the phase when many women say they can't do it. And what that means is that they are about to. When she says she can't, Iris said, that's when you hold her hand and you don't say anything. Don't coach, don't encourage. Don't tell her she's strong. Just be the thing she squeezes. What if something goes wrong? Iris looked at me with an expression that calibrated how much truth I could absorb. If the baby is positioned normally and there are no cord complications, this should be straightforward. Humans did this for 200,000 years without buildings or electricity. Your wife's body is not confused. It knows the procedure. She paused. If there's a complication cord around the neck, breech presentation, hemorrhage, I've managed all of those in hospital settings with equipment I don't have. I'll manage with what I do have, which is my hands and 40 years of knowing what normal feels like, so I can recognize when it isn't. That was not a guarantee. I didn't ask for one, because I had been learning all morning, that the currency of this day was not certainty, but the willingness to act inside its absence. At 11:35, something hit the main stairwell door from the other side. Not the impacts we'd heard from below. This was closer. This was our floor. Dennis and I went to the barricade and pressed our ears to the gap between the console table and the door frame and listened. Movement on the other side. Not footsteps, a shuffling, irregular, wet. The sound of a body navigating space without the cooperation of its own joints. Then a thud against the door that moved the console table half an inch. Dennis put his hand on the table and pushed it back. The lag bolts are holding. The frame is the weak point. These are hollow metal frames set into concrete block with expansion anchors. They'll hold against 100, perhaps 200 pounds of sustained pressure, if more than one accumulates. Another thud. The table moved again. Dennis braced it with his body. Marcus. Elena's voice from the bedroom. Not a scream. Worse, a controlled declaration. Something's happening. I left Dennis at the barricade and went to the bedroom. Elena was on her side with Iris behind her and Priya at the foot of the bed, and Elena's face was a landscape of focused endurance, every muscle organized around a central event that was no longer approaching, but occurring. She's complete, Iris said. 10 centimeters. The baby is descending. Now? Soon, not yet. She needs to feel the urge to push. Don't rush it. I knelt beside the bed, and Elena gripped my hand. Her palm was hot and slick, and her fingers closed around mine with a strength I didn't know she had. And she looked at me with eyes that were entirely present and entirely elsewhere here in the room with me, and also in the private country of her own body, where I had no passport and no jurisdiction and no role except to remain. I'm here, I said. I know. Another contraction. She bore down against it instinctively, and Iris said, Not yet, not yet. Let it build. And Elena made a sound through her teeth like a word trying to escape a locked room. From the hallway, the sound of Dennis's drill. He was adding more lag bolts. Cal was coughing. The children in the nursery were silent, which meant Kevin was doing something right, or they'd gone so far inside themselves that silence was the only landscape left. The building groaned. Not the stairwell door, the building itself. Somewhere above us, a window broke. Glass falling inside a room makes a specific sound, crystalline and domestic, nothing like the sound it makes hitting pavement. Someone on a floor above us had lost a window, or broken one, or something had come through it. Elena squeezed my hand so hard, I felt the bones shift. Marcus, I'm here. I can feel the baby. It's low. It's coming. Iris moved into position. Priya prepared the towels. The headlamp beam narrowed the world to the bed, to Elena, to the space between her body and the air where our child would arrive. And the stairwell door shuddered again. And Dennis called out, I need another set of hands out here. And I looked at my wife, and she looked at me and said the thing that broke the morning open. Go help him. Come back when I call you. I'm not leaving this room. I have Iris. I have Priya. They know what to do. Dennis doesn't have anyone. She released my hand. Go be useful where you're needed. I'll call you when it's time. I went to the barricade. Dennis was holding the console table with his shoulder, and his face was sheened with sweat, and his pressed trousers had sawdust on the knees. On the other side of the door, the pressure was no longer intermittent. It was constant, a slow lean, the weight of at least two bodies pressing without strategy or fatigue against a surface they couldn't understand, but wouldn't stop touching. "We need more mass," Dennis said. "This table will slide. The lag bolts will strip from the frame before the door fails, but once the bolts go, the table is the only thing. And I am a 71-year-old man who weighs 162 pounds. I looked down the hallway. The doors to the other 7th-floor apartments were closed. We'd never knocked on 7D or 7E. We'd been so focused on assembling what we needed for Elena that we'd ignored the possibility that resources and people existed 20 feet away. "Stay here," I said. I went to 7D and knocked. No answer. I knocked harder. A voice inside, male, young. "Go away. We need help. The stairwell door is giving way." "That's not my problem. You're on this floor. It's your problem." Silence. Then the door opened, and a man my age looked out. He was wearing gym shorts and a tank top, and he had a baseball bat in one hand. And a woman stood behind him in the hallway of their apartment, holding a phone that was clearly dead. His name, I'd learn later, was Jordan. Hers was Tasha. They'd been in the building for 3 months. "We're not opening our door for anyone," Jordan said. "I'm not asking you to open your door. I'm asking you to help me push a table against a stairwell door so the things in the stairwell don't get onto this floor where my wife is delivering a baby and there are 3 children in a room down the hall." Jordan looked past me. He could see Dennis braced against the table, the drill on the floor, the door flexing in its frame. He looked at Tasha. She said nothing. He stepped out. We repositioned the console table and added a heavy wooden chair from 7D and a filing cabinet that Dennis suggested we take from the alcove near the elevator. Jordan was strong and worked without speaking, which was the best version of him available to me at that moment. We built a compression stack table against door, chair braced under the table's edge, filing cabinet behind the chair, all wedged against the hallway's opposite wall so the force distributed across the corridor's width. Dennis checked the lag bolts. 2 had partially stripped. He replaced them with longer ones from his toolbox, driving them through the hollow metal frame into the concrete block at an angle that maximized shear resistance. The pressure against the door slowed. Not stopped, slowed. The bodies on the other side seemed to shift, redistribute, redirect. I heard them moving away, then moving back, then away again. They were not problem-solving. They were not testing alternatives. They were responding to stimuli sound, maybe vibration, maybe something else. And their attention had a half-life that made them terrifyingly persistent, but not strategic. "The east door," Dennis said. "We should check it." We went to the east barricade. The bookcase was undisturbed. No sound from the other side. This stairwell was still clear, which meant Naya's path down might still be open, and her path back might still exist. I pressed my ear to the gap and heard nothing, no shuffling, no wet dragging, no impacts. Just the vertical silence of a concrete shaft with the power off and the lights dead. Jordan stood beside me and for the first time said something that wasn't refusal. My girlfriend's grandmother was a midwife in Port-au-Prince. Tasha knows things. She won't say it because she's scared, but she knows things. What kind of things? Births, complications. She watched her grandmother work until she was 16. She told me once she'd seen a breech delivery done by hand in a kitchen. I looked at him. Send her to 7F. Ask for Iris. Tell her we have another pair of hands if she needs them. Jordan left. I stayed at the east barricade and listened to the silence and thought about Naya descending into the dark with a pry bar and a flashlight, looking for a man who'd gone toward information the way a moth goes toward light. And I thought about Elena on the bed with 2 medical professionals, and maybe soon a 3rd set of hands trained in a kitchen in Port-au-Prince. And I thought about the fact that I was standing in a hallway holding nothing, guarding a door that was quiet, while every room that mattered had someone in it who was not me. At 12:06 p.m., Elena began to push. I was in the room because she called me. Her voice came down the hallway, not a shout, not my name, just a sound that I recognized the way you recognize your own heartbeat when a stethoscope makes it external and you think, oh, that's what's been happening inside me this whole time. I came into the bedroom and Iris was at the foot of the bed, and Priya was beside her. And Tasha was standing at the far wall holding a towel. And Elena was on her back with her knees up. And her face was the most focused thing I'd ever seen. Not pain. Focus. The pain was there. I could see it in the tendons of her neck and the white of her knuckles on the bed rail, but it was not the primary event. The primary event was her will, driving downward through her body like a piston through a cylinder. "Come here," she said. I went to the head of the bed. She took my hand. She pulled me down until my face was next to hers, and she said into my ear, in a voice meant only for me, "I'm going to do this. You're going to watch. Don't look away." I didn't look away. Iris coached from the foot of the bed with a voice that was calm and rhythmic and completely in command. And I understood that this was her instrument, not her hands, not her knowledge. But this voice, tuned over decades to the frequency of women in the most extreme physical effort of their lives. Push into the pressure. Good. Breathe. Wait for the next one. You're doing it. The head is right there. Elena pushed. The contraction came and she bore down, and her whole body arched with the effort, and the sound she made was not a scream. It was structural, foundational. The sound of a building taking on a load it was designed to hold, but had never been asked to hold before. Iris's hands were ready. Priya was ready. Tasha held the towel. I held Elena's hand, and I held my breath. And outside the bedroom door, I could hear the stairwell barricade creaking and Dennis saying something to Jordan. And the children being silent in the nursery, and the building making its indifferent sounds around us. At 12:14 p.m. the head crowned. Iris said, "I can see the head. Dark hair, beautiful. Next push, Elena. Give me everything." Elena gave everything. The contraction peaked, and she pushed with a force that seemed to come from a source deeper than muscle, from the place where the body stores its knowledge of what it is for. The ancient archive that predates language and thought and electricity and buildings and every system that was failing around us. The baby's head emerged into Iris's hands. "Stop pushing," Iris said. "Wait, let me check the cord." Her fingers moved around the baby's neck with a precision that was as much touch as sight. No cord. Beautiful. One more push. Whenever you're ready. Elena breathed. She looked at me. Her eyes were filled with something I'd never seen in them. Not fear, not joy, not relief, but a kind of sovereign authority, as if pushing a human being out of her body in a dead building surrounded by the dead had clarified something she'd always known, but never had occasion to prove. She was not asking for permission. She was not asking for help. She was informing me, with her eyes, that this was hers. She pushed. At 12:17 p.m., the baby came into the world in Iris Colon's hands on the 7th floor of Sycamore Towers in a room lit by a headlamp and 2 lanterns. And the first sound our daughter made was a cry so immediate, so indignant, so alive, that every person in the apartment went still. Iris placed the baby on Elena's chest. The cord was still attached, pulsing. Elena's hands came up and covered the baby's back, and she made a sound that was crying and laughing and breathing, and none of those things, and all of those things. Priya was wiping the baby's face with a warm, wet cloth. Tasha had tears running down her cheeks, and she hadn't moved from the wall. I was kneeling beside the bed with my hand still in Elena's hand, and my face was wet, and I could not speak. The baby cried. Elena cried. In the nursery, Luca said, "Is that a baby?" And Kevin said, "Yes, that's a baby." Iris tied the cord with a clean shoelace in 2 places and cut between them with the scissors I'd set out. She delivered the placenta 12 minutes later, examined it under the headlamp, and said, "Complete. No tears I'm concerned about. Bleeding is normal." She wrapped the baby in the towel Tasha had been holding and placed her back on Elena's chest and said, "She's perfect. About 7 pounds. Strong lungs." My daughter. In a building without power, without water pressure, without safety, without any of the infrastructure I'd assumed was the minimum requirement for a life to begin, my daughter, who did not know and would never remember that she was born in a room where the hallway outside was barricaded against the dead, and the air smelled like lavender plug-in, and sweat and blood, and the impossible optimism of a nursery-painted quiet sage. Elena looked at me. She was exhausted. She was luminous. She said, "Her name is Mira." Dennis came to the bedroom door 17 minutes after Mira was born, and stood there without entering. He looked at the baby on Elena's chest, and his face did something I hadn't expected. It softened completely. The structural precision replaced by a tenderness so unguarded that I understood he had children somewhere, or had had them, and this room had opened a door in him that the morning had been designed to seal. "The east stairwell is still clear," he said quietly. "The main is holding, but the pressure is increasing. I count 3, maybe 4 bodies against the door now based on the load. Jordan is braced against it." "How long?" "Hours, maybe less. The lag bolts are the limiting factor. When they strip, the door opens. When the door opens, the hallway opens. We need to leave this floor." "She just gave birth." "I know." He looked at Elena. "I know. But the baby is born, and the mother is bleeding normally, and the question is no longer how to deliver. The question is how to move." Elena heard all of this. She was nursing Mira, or trying to, positioning the baby against her breast with Iris guiding the latch. And she said without looking up, "How do we move?" Dennis unfolded his building diagram on the bedside table. "The east service stairwell is clear from 7 to at least 10. Kevin confirmed the upper floors are less compromised because the outbreak entered from the ground level and rose through the main stairwell first. The roof has a maintenance hatch on 14. If the hatch key is accessible or the lock is breakable, the roof gives us open air, separation, and visibility for signaling." "Signaling who?" I asked. "I don't know. Someone. Anyone. The roof is the only position in this building that makes us visible from outside. Everything else is internal." Priya came to the doorway. "How long before she can move?" "She can move now," Elena said. "Help me sit up." Iris protested gently. Elena overruled her, not gently. "I've been lying down for 6 hours. I can feel my legs. The bleeding is slowing. If we have to climb stairs, I need to start sitting up now, so I know what my body will do when I ask it to stand." Iris helped her sit. Elena swayed, steadied, held Mira against her shoulder. The baby made a small sound, not a cry, a murmur, the vocal equivalent of adjusting to gravity. Elena looked at me and said, "How many flights to 14? 7. Okay, I need 20 minutes. Then we go." Those 20 minutes were the most organized period of the morning. Dennis and Cal drew up a movement plan. Kevin would carry Luca. Priya would carry Adi. Mira would walk between Dennis and Jordan. Tasha would carry the supply bag Iris had packed. Iris would walk behind Elena. I would walk beside Elena and carry Mira when Elena needed her hands free. Cal would bring up the rear at his own pace, with his inhaler and whatever breath he had left. At 1:05 p.m., Elena stood. She held the bed rail with one hand and Mira with the other, and she stood. And the act of standing, an act she performed 1,000 times a day without thought, was now an achievement of such magnitude that Iris began to cry and stopped herself and said, "Okay, she's up, let's move." We opened the east barricade for the last time. Dennis checked the stairwell, flashlight beam descending, listening. "Clear," he signaled. We entered the shaft in the order we'd planned. 11 people and 1 baby, ascending in the dark, the sound of our footsteps, the loudest thing in a building where every other sound had become predatory. On the 8th floor landing, we passed the door to the hallway, and I heard movement on the other side. The shuffling, the wet friction of bodies navigating without coordination. They were on 8 now. The main stairwell had fed them upward floor by floor, and the magnetic locks had let them through every door. The east stairwell was the last clear channel in a building filling from the bottom up like a vessel filling with dark water. Elena climbed. She climbed slowly, one hand on the railing. Mira pressed against her chest in the sling Tasha had fashioned from a bedsheet. Each step was a negotiation between her will and her body's post-delivery protest. I stayed beside her, with my hand hovering near her elbow, not touching, because she hadn't asked me to touch. And I'd learned today that Elena's body belonged to Elena, and my role was to be available when she reached for me, not to install myself where I assumed I was needed. We reached the 14th floor at 1:31 p.m. Cal arrived 3 minutes later, wheezing badly. The roof access hatch was in the ceiling of a small utility closet off the main hallway. It was padlocked. Dennis examined the lock and the hasp. The hasp was bolted into a steel plate welded to the closet frame. The lock was a standard master combination. Dennis looked at Jordan, who understood without being asked, and swung the baseball bat. The hasp bent on the first hit, tore free on the third. Sunlight fell through the open hatch like a substance, warm, bright, physical. After 6 hours in a building lit only by battery-powered lanterns and the gray wash of stairwell emergency strips, the sunlight was an assault and a gift simultaneously. I climbed the ladder first and emerged onto the roof into open air, and a sky so blue and indifferent to what was happening below it that I felt, for one vertiginous moment, that the building and everything inside it was a hallucination, and the real world was up here, flat and tarred and bordered by a low parapet and populated by HVAC units and a satellite dish. I helped Elena up. She came through the hatch holding Mira and standing in the sun, and the baby blinked against the light and made a sound that was not a cry, but a recognition, the first unfiltered daylight of her life, received on a rooftop 14 stories above a street she might never walk on. Everyone came up. Kevin and Luca, Priya and Mira and Adi, Dennis, Jordan and Tasha. Cal last, hauled through by Jordan's arms. Iris emerged and sat on the roof surface and put her hands on her knees and breathed like someone who had been holding her breath since 7:22 a.m. and was only now allowing herself the luxury of oxygen. The view from the roof told us the story the building hadn't. The street below was not empty, it was occupied. But wrongly, figures moving in patterns that were not pedestrian, not purposeful, not recognizable as human transit. They moved like weather. Cars were stopped at angles that meant they'd been abandoned mid-turn. A fire was burning 3 blocks east, unhurried, unfought. Across the skyline, several columns of smoke rose from different neighborhoods like gray pillars holding up a ceiling of haze. The city wasn't gone. It was changed, remapped by a logic that had replaced economic activity with biological transmission as the organizing principle of movement. But above us, helicopters, 2 of them, far to the south, moving in a pattern that suggested coordination rather than chaos. Dennis saw them too. Military or emergency, they're running a grid. How do we signal? Dennis looked around the roof. The satellite dish was useless. The HVAC units were bolted down. There were no reflective surfaces large enough to catch light at distance. Then Tasha said, "The sheets." She'd carried the supply bag. In it were 2 of our white bed sheets, the ones Iris had packed as backup delivery cloths. Tasha spread one on the roof and weighted the corners with chunks of parapet gravel, white against black tar, visible from altitude. We waited. The helicopters moved in their grid. Mira nursed. Cal breathed. The children sat in a cluster near the HVAC unit, and Mira, who was 9 and had not spoken since arriving on 7, pointed at the sky and said, "They'll see us." She said it with certainty, the way children sometimes say things that have no evidentiary basis, but carry the full weight of belief. At 2:15 p.m., the East Service stairwell door on 14 banged open inside the building below us. Dennis and Jordan moved the hatch cover back into position, and Jordan sat on it. We could hear them in the hallway beneath us, the shuffling, the collisions with walls, the sound of a population navigating a building they'd once lived in without any remaining knowledge of what living meant. And then, at 2:22, the sound of a helicopter growing louder. Not the distant grid runners, something closer, lower, a sharp chop of rotors descending toward us as if the white sheet had been not a signal but a summons, and the pilot's voice crackling over a loudspeaker. "Rooftop occupants, hold position. Extraction in progress." Iris stood up. She was standing next to Elena and Mira, and she put her hand on Elena's shoulder and said nothing. And Elena put her hand over Iris's hand and said nothing. And between the 2 of them, the silence contained everything the morning had produced, the skill and the trust and the terror and the body that did what the building could not, which was to remain generative while everything around it was becoming ruin. The helicopter landed on the southeast corner of the roof where the surface was flattest, and a crew of 3 National Guard personnel in full protective gear dropped a ramp and waved us forward. The rotor wash pushed Mira's blanket against Elena's neck, and she shielded the baby with both arms and walked toward the aircraft with steps that I am certain cost her more than anything she'd done that day, including pushing a child out of her body, because walking toward rescue requires the admission that you needed it. And Elena Vargas has spent every day of her life constructing the opposite. They loaded us in groups. Women and children first, not a policy anyone stated, but a gravitational order that asserted itself the moment the ramp was down. Elena and Mira went first. Priya carried Adi and held Mira's hand. Tasha walked between them. Iris refused to board until Cal was loaded because she could see his color and she didn't like it, and she wanted her hands near him. Kevin carried Luca up the ramp, and the boy's face, which had been expressionless for hours, turned toward the helicopter's interior lights, and he said, "Daddy, it's loud." Kevin said, "I know, buddy. It's loud because it's taking us somewhere safe." I was the last one up the ramp. I turned and looked at the roof. The white sheet was flapping in the rotor wash, pinned on two corners, tearing free on the others. Below us, through the open hatch, I could see movement in the hallway shapes in the dark, pressing upward toward the square of daylight we'd opened. The helicopter lifted before they reached the ladder. The guard crew chief checked Elena and Mira first. He spoke into his radio and said, "Postpartum female and newborn, stable." And those words, clinical, procedural, transmitted into a system that still functioned, were the most beautiful sentence I'd heard in my life. Not because they meant safety, because they meant Elena and Mira existed in Aiwao, a record, in a structure, in a language that recognized them as categories worth transmitting. The collapse had not erased the architecture of care. It had damaged it, rerouted it, forced it onto rooftops and into canvas bags packed by retired nurses, but it persisted. We flew south. The city scrolled beneath us, and it was worse from the air, the scale of it, the randomness of which blocks were burning, and which were still, the parking lots that had become gathering points for things that gathered without purpose. Elena held Mira and looked out the window, and I sat beside her, and did not look because I was looking at them, at the two of them, at the closed circuit of mother and child that I was adjacent to but not inside of. And I understood something I'd been learning all day, but hadn't named. I was not the protagonist of this story. I had never been. The protagonist was the woman beside me who dilated to 10 centimeters in a powerless building and pushed a human being into the world while the dead accumulated against the door. And the other protagonist was the woman who packed a canvas bag before anyone knocked. And the other was the woman who descended a dark stairwell to find her husband because the alternative was a world without him in it. Naya. I hadn't seen her at the rooftop. She hadn't been with us. She'd gone down the east stairwell at 10 a.m., and the east stairwell had stayed clear long enough for us to climb, and then it hadn't. And she was somewhere in that building, or she wasn't. And I didn't know. The helicopter landed at a staging area on a soccer field in New Jersey, where tents were set up and medical personnel were triaging arrivals. They took Elena and Mira into a tent immediately. Iris went with them. Priya went with her children to a family processing area. Cal was taken by stretcher to a medical unit where they put an oxygen mask on him, and his color started to improve. Dennis stood on the soccer field with his toolbox and his radio and looked at the skyline across the river and said, "I built 3 buildings in that city. I supervised the concrete work. They'll stand. The buildings will stand longer than this." Kevin stood beside me with Luca on his hip. Jordan and Tasha were being directed to a registration desk. Mira was holding Addie's hand and walking toward the tents with the confidence of a child who has decided that adults will be where they're supposed to be. "Your wife," Kevin said. "She's something." "Yeah. You know that, right?" "I've known that since a laundromat on Flatbush Avenue." They kept Elena and Mira for observation in a field hospital tent for 9 hours. Iris refused to leave. She sat in a folding chair beside the cot with her canvas bag at her feet and her hands in her lap. And when the attending physician, a young woman in scrubs who looked like she hadn't slept in 2 days, asked Iris to describe the delivery, Iris gave a clinical summary so precise and comprehensive that the physician said, "You should be running this tent." "I'm retired," Iris said. "Unretire." Iris looked at Elena nursing Mira on the cot. "I'll think about it." Elena was dehydrated and anemic, but otherwise stable. Mira scored well on every assessment they could perform in a field setting. Her heart was strong. Her lungs were clear. She latched well. She slept in Elena's arms in a tent in New Jersey while helicopters came and went outside, and the soccer field filled with people who had been extracted from buildings and rooftops and overpasses, each carrying their own version of the morning. I sat outside the tent on an overturned plastic crate and made a list in my head of every person who had kept my wife and daughter alive. Iris, Priya, Naya, Dennis, Tasha, Kevin, even Glenn, who I'd last seen in the lobby holding a fire extinguisher and delivering the first accurate intelligence report of the collapse. Even Paul on 8, who gave me Iris's name and apartment number. Even Jordan, who came out of his door with a bat and a refusal and became the man who sat on a hatch so the dead couldn't follow us into the sky. I was not on the list. I need to be honest about that. I was not on the list because I did not perform a single act of medical, structural, or tactical significance during the 11 hours between the elevator stopping and the helicopter landing. I did not deliver my daughter. I did not build the barricade. I did not diagnose the building's weakness, or pack the bag, or climb into the dark to find a missing husband. I carried towels. I boiled water. I filled a bathtub. I held a hand. I stood in hallways waiting to be told where to go. And here is what I learned. That was the job. That was my job. Not because I'm incapable of more, but because the rooms that mattered were full of people who were capable of exactly what those rooms required. And my capability was to not be in the way, to carry what was handed to me, to open doors when asked, to stand beside a woman and let her squeeze my hand while her body performed the most extraordinary act of engineering I will ever witness, and to understand that my presence was not diminished by my uselessness, it was completed by it. Elena didn't need me to be Iris. She didn't need me to be Dennis. She needed me to be the person who walked 4 blocks for bagels because the place on our street doesn't toast them right. She needed me to be the person who held the stopwatch and didn't pretend to understand what the numbers meant. She needed me to be in the room, not running the room, not managing the room, not interpreting the room, but in it, available. The fixed point she could locate with her hand in the dark when everything else was procedure and pain, and the unknowable country of her own body, bringing our daughter into a world that was ending and beginning at the same time. Mira opened her eyes at 11 p.m. in the field hospital tent and looked at me. Newborns can't focus. The books all say that. Their vision is blurry, limited to 8 to 12 inches. Optimized for the distance between a nursing baby's eyes and a mother's face. But Mira looked at me from 14 inches, which is just past the edge of what the books say she could see. And I chose to believe she saw me. Not because it's medically accurate. Because I was her father. And I was there. And being there was the thing I did. The only thing. The enough thing. 3 weeks later, in a temporary housing unit outside Trenton, Elena was nursing Mira at 4 a.m. while I sat on the floor next to the mattress doing nothing useful. She said, "You've been quiet." "I'm thinking." "About what?" "The building, what I did, what I didn't do." Elena shifted Mira to her other side. "You filled the bathtub?" "That's what I mean." "Marcus." She waited until I looked at her. Mira's hand was curled around Elena's finger, 5 miniature knuckles gripping with the intensity of someone who does not yet know that some things stay. "You came back into the room every time I called. You left every time I told you to. Do you know how rare that is? A man who enters and exits a room based on what the room needs instead of what he needs the room to see?" I didn't answer. Mira released Elena's finger and flexed her hand in the dark, testing the air, learning the weight of nothing. "That's not uselessness," Elena said. "That's trust, and I built a whole person on it."